We're back, and now I am joined by Brendan Burns, who's the Corporate Vice President of Azure OSS Cloud Native. Hi, Brendan.
Hey there, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, knee-deep into build day one. So speaking of which, I heard that you had a demo as part of Scott Guthrie's session. So how has your Microsoft build experience been? What do you think about that demo? All that jazz.
It's been great. It was really nice to be able to show off some of the developer productivity tooling that we've been working on. I think that as we see more and more people adopting containers and cloud native technology, it becomes really important to help them jump in and become as productive as possible quickly. And that means integrating them not just with the Kubernetes service that we have, but with GitHub and GitHub Actions and Visual Studio Code, just all of the different pieces of the Microsoft Cloud that make developers more productive.
Great. And yeah, you mentioned Kubernetes and a lot of different pieces. So between Kubernetes, Docker, and all those other features that as they relate to Azure, what does all of that mean? How do all those features work together?
Yeah, well, I think really what it's all about fundamentally is enabling developers to focus on the application. I think when we think about the early or some of the infrastructure cloud that has existed in the past, it's been all about the stuff, a virtual disk or a virtual machine or a virtual network. Those are infrastructure concepts. They're not really application concepts. If I'm a developer, I think about my application, I think about my services, I think about how they connect to one another. And so what I think Kubernetes and containers enable the developer to do is kind of forget about the infrastructure that they're running on top of, and have a midway point in between infrastructure as a service and maybe something like Azure Functions that's a little bit more of a platform as a service. So you're still in charge. You still run the main. You still write all the code. You can use whatever language you want or whatever libraries you want. But it feels like the APIs, the infrastructure APIs, are speaking your language as a developer.
I love that, API speaking your language. I think that's a great way to put it. So since Azure Cloud Native is part of the open source community, how are you engaging and growing with the open source community?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the Kubernetes journey for me started with open source and started with that community and, three or four people starting, coming together and it just snowballing from there. We just had a really great KubeCon EU in Valencia, Spain, where, I heard about 7,000 people across Europe and the US came together for a really great event. It was fantastic, actually, to be able to highlight not just the broad open source community, but even the open source community that's happening within Microsoft, where we had the Forza team come and talk about how they had used Kubernetes and open source tech to launch Forza Horizons 5. That has was game of the year this past year and is running on top of the Azure Kubernetes service. So really a fantastic experience, and honestly, I love that game. So it was fun to get a chance to hang out with that team.
Awesome. I am really bad at Forza, but if somebody asks me to play, I get excited because it is a good time. And it's cool to see how these tools work on top of an already great product like that. So one of the struggles that developers have had for a long time has been trying to prioritize security concerns at the cost of agility and productivity. So how does Cloud Native and Azure Kubernetes help fix some of those security challenges while also helping people stay more productive?
Yeah, I think a lot of the cloud native stuff started, maybe and got associated with startups or other people who maybe don't have some of those concerns. But I think what we found out actually is that even startups get big and have privacy and security and data concerns. And then of course, the enterprise wants the same thing. They want agility. They want the ability to harness an open source ecosystem. And so what we've been doing a lot of work in is actually taking a lot of our experience in things like policy and things like identity, and bringing them to cloud native open source projects. So we've taken things like Azure Active Directory, integrated it into Kubernetes so you can get all of the same kind of conditional access management and all of the security tools that your Active Directory team wants, but integrated into the tools that the open source community is producing. And similarly with policy, actually, we went out and created a whole new open source project, partnered with some other people in the open source communities who are developing policy tools, and then brought them back to Azure Kubernetes as a part of the product to be supported by the end users. So really great community, I think, arising around the needs of security, but in a new cloud native and open source context.
All right, and to quickly wrap things up, where can developers go to learn more about the cloud native experience in Azure?
So you can go to azure.com and find out about Kubernetes. You can also go to kubernetes.io if you're looking for learning paths in the open source community. And of course, we're also up on GitHub at github/azure/AKS.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brendan.
Thank you. It's great to be here.